Tay wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken engine part. His ship, the Wandering Star, needed repairs again. The old cargo vessel always needed something fixed. But repairs cost money, and money meant taking jobs he didn't always like. He stood in the cargo bay of Helix 7, one of the largest trading stations in the Outer Rim. The station floated in the darkness between star systems, a place where law meant little and questions meant even less. Tay had been coming here for 5 years, ever since he left Earth and started hauling freight across the galaxy. "You look tired, friend," said Day, his co-pilot and only real friend in this part of space. Day was younger than Tay, barely 30, with an easy smile that made people trust him. That smile helped them get better deals on cargo runs. Tay shrugged. Just another day. They walked through the station's main market, a vast hall filled with beings from 100 different worlds. The air smelled of strange spices and fuel. Lights flickered overhead, casting shadows on the crowd below. Merchants shouted in languages Tay didn't understand. Others whispered deals in dark corners. That's when he saw her. A group of armed men dragged a woman through the crowd. She wore chains on her wrists and ankles. Her skin was pale blue, almost silver in the harsh station lights. Her eyes were large and dark, like deep water. She was Velian. Tay recognized her species from the war reports he'd seen years ago. The Velians had lost their homeworld in a war with the Krell Empire. After that, many Velians were captured and sold as slaves. They were valued for their intelligence. Velian scientists and engineers were the best in the galaxy, but that made them targets. The woman stumbled. One of the men yanked her chain hard. She fell to her knees. The crowd kept moving around her like she was nothing. Just another piece of cargo changing hands. Tay stopped walking. "Don't," Day said quietly. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." But Tay couldn't look away. The woman raised her head and their eyes met. Even in chains, even beaten down, there was something in her gaze. Fire. Defiance. She refused to break. As the man dragged her past, she whispered in broken universal standard, the common language of traders. "Help me. I can pay." Then she was gone, pulled into the shadows of a side corridor. "Tay," Day grabbed his arm. "We have a cargo run to make. We need the money." "I know," Tay said. But his feet were already moving, following the men who had the Velian woman. He stayed far enough back that they wouldn't notice. Day followed, cursing under his breath. They wound through the station's lower levels, past gambling dens and illegal tech shops. Finally, the men stopped at a sealed door marked with the symbol of the Red Chain Syndicate. Tay knew that name. Everyone in the Outer Rim knew it. The Red Chain ran most of the illegal trade in this sector. Weapons, drugs, slaves. They dealt in anything that made money. "We need to leave," Day whispered. "Now, before they see us." "Wait!" Tay pressed himself against the wall and listened. The voices carried through the thin station walls. "The buyer wants her transported to the research facility on Corvus 3. She's a quantum physicist. Worked on displacement technology before her world fell." "What's displacement technology?" "Who cares? We just move the cargo. Payment arrives once she's delivered." Tay's jaw tightened. They talked about her like she was a machine, not a person. The door opened and the men walked out, laughing about something. Tay and Day ducked into a maintenance corridor until they passed. When the hall was clear, Tay stood up. "What are you doing?" Day asked. "Finding out more." Tay spent the next 6 hours asking questions in the right places, paying the right people. He learned the woman's name was Lyra. She had been a professor on Velia Prime before the war. She'd been enslaved for 12 years, sold from owner to owner. Each one used her mind for their own profit. Now the Red Chain was taking her to a secret facility where enslaved scientists built weapons. He also learned she was worth a fortune. Her knowledge of quantum technology could change space travel forever. or it could destroy planets. Either way, whoever owned her had power. That night, Tay sat in his ship's cockpit and stared at the stars. His sister Hannah's last message played in his mind. She wanted him to come home to Earth. She said he'd been running long enough, but Tay couldn't go back. Not after what happened to his wife in the colony raid, not after he failed to protect her. "You're actually thinking about doing something stupid, aren't you?" Day sat down in the co-pilot seat. "Maybe. That woman is Red Chain property now. They'll kill anyone who interferes." "She's not property. She's a person." Day sighed. "We have 8,000 credits in our account. That's barely enough to keep this ship running for 2 months. If we get involved, we lose everything. Maybe our lives, too." Tay knew his friend was right. The smart move was to forget what he saw, take their next cargo job, and keep flying. That's what he'd been doing for 5 years. Stay moving. Don't get attached. Don't risk anything. But something about Lyra's eyes wouldn't leave his mind. "I have a plan," Tay said slowly. "Oh no. The transfer to Corvus 3 happens tomorrow night. They're moving her through Bay 23. That section of the station has old wiring. Power outages happen all the time there." "You want to stage a blackout?" "I know a guard who works that section. For 3,000 credits, he'll look the other way." Day stared at him. "That's half our money." "I know. And what happens after we rescue her? The Red Chain will hunt us across the galaxy." "I know that too." Silence filled the cockpit. Outside, ships came and went from the station, each one carrying cargo and secrets. The galaxy was huge and cold and didn't care about one enslaved woman. But Tay couldn't stop caring. Maybe that made him a fool. Probably did. "All right," Day said finally. "I'll prep the ship for a fast departure. But when this goes wrong, I'm saying I told you so." Tay smiled for the first time in days. "Deal." The next night, exactly as planned, the lights in Bay 23 went dark. In the confusion, Tay slipped through the chaos wearing a stolen station uniform. He found Lyra being transferred between guards. He knocked out one with a shock stick and grabbed her. "Come with me if you want to live," he said in Universal Standard. Her eyes went wide, but she nodded. They ran through the dark corridors. Behind them, alarms started blaring. Voices shouted in anger. Tay's heart pounded as they reached the wandering star. Day had the engines running. They dragged Lyra aboard and sealed the hatch. Seconds later, the ship launched from the station, flying into the dark between stars. Tay had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Or maybe finally, he'd done something right. Lyra collapsed the moment they were safely in space. Her legs gave out, and she fell to the floor of the cargo hold. Tay caught her before her head hit the metal. "Med bay now," he said to Day. They carried her to the small medical room on the ship. It wasn't much, just a bed and some basic equipment. But it was all they had. Tay carefully removed her chains. His hands shook with anger when he saw what was underneath. Scars covered her wrists and ankles, old wounds that never healed properly, burns on her arms, signs of years of suffering. He cleaned her wounds with the ship's medical supplies. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words in her own language. When he gave her water, she drank like someone who'd been thirsty for days. Day stood in the doorway, watching the scanner screens. "We have a problem. 3 ships just launched from Helix 7. They're following us." "How long until they catch up?" 2 hours, maybe 3. This old ship can't outrun Red Chain hunters." Tay finished bandaging Lyra's arms. "Set course for the drift. If we can make it there, we can lose them in the debris fields." The drift was a region of space filled with the remains of old ships and broken stations. Pirates and smugglers used it to hide from authorities. It was dangerous, but it was their best chance. For the next 2 hours, they pushed the wandering star as hard as it could go. The engines screamed in protest. Warning lights flashed on the control panel, but they kept flying. Lyra woke up when they entered the drift. She sat up slowly, wincing in pain. Her dark eyes looked around the medical room with confusion. "Where am I?" she asked, in Universal Standard. Her voice was soft but clear. "On my ship. You're safe now." Tay handed her a protein bar. "You need to eat." She stared at the food like she didn't trust it. Then hunger won, and she ate quickly. When she finished, she looked at Tay with those deep, intelligent eyes. "Why did you help me? What do you want?" "Nothing. I just couldn't let them take you to that facility." "You're lying. Everyone wants something." Tay shook his head. "I'm not lying. But you were right about one thing. You said you could pay. Well, now the Red Chain has put a bounty on both our heads. So if you have a way to help us survive, I'm listening." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I was a professor on Velia Prime. I taught quantum physics at the university. When the Krell came, they destroyed everything. My city burned. My husband died protecting our daughter." Her voice didn't break, but Tay could hear the pain in it. "They took me because of my research. I had been working on quantum displacement technology, a way to bend space itself, to travel instantly across vast distances. Every master who bought me wanted that knowledge, but I never gave it to them." "Why not?" Tay asked. "Because that technology in the wrong hands could destroy worlds. It could tear holes in space that would swallow entire systems. I would rather die than let slavers have that power." Day's voice came through the comm system. "We've got incoming. 2 ships just came around the asteroid on our left." Tay ran to the cockpit. Lyra followed, moving slower because of her injuries. Through the view screen, they could see 2 Red Chain hunters closing in fast. Their weapons were charging. "Hold on!" Tay threw the ship into a sharp turn, diving between 2 chunks of a broken station. Laser fire lit up the space behind them. One shot hit their rear shield, making the whole ship shake. "Shields at 60%, Day called out. "We can't take many more hits." Tay flew through the debris field like a madman. He twisted and turned using the wreckage as cover. The hunters followed, but they were bigger ships, less nimble. One of them clipped an asteroid and spun off course, but the other one stayed close. Too close. "They're charging main weapons," Day said. "If that hits us, we're done." Lyra suddenly spoke up. "The asteroid field ahead. Do you see the pattern?" "What pattern?" Tay asked, not taking his eyes off the controls. "The debris is moving in predictable orbits. If you fly through the gap at 17 degrees, you'll clear it. But if they follow at the same angle, that large piece of station hull will swing into their path in exactly 8 seconds. Tay looked at the screen. He couldn't see what she was talking about, but something in her voice made him trust her. "Day, program that course. Are you crazy? We'll crash. Do it." Day's fingers flew over the controls. The ship turned hard, heading straight for what looked like a solid wall of debris. Behind them, the hunter ship followed. Tay counted in his head. 5 seconds. 6, 7. Then he pulled up hard. The wandering star shot through a gap that seemed too small for it. Metal scraped against their hull. Alarms blared, but they made it through. Behind them, the hunter ship wasn't so lucky. The massive piece of station hull swung around exactly as Lyra predicted. It smashed into the hunter, tearing it in half. The explosion lit up the drift like a small sun. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Day started laughing. "How did you know that would work?" "Mathematics," Lyra said simply. "Orbital mechanics are predictable if you can calculate fast enough." Tay looked at her with new respect. "You did that math in your head? In seconds?" "I'm Valian. We're taught advanced mathematics before your species learns to read." She said it as a simple fact, not bragging. They flew deeper into the drift until they were sure no one was following. Then Tay set the ship on autopilot, and they all sat in the cockpit, exhausted. "They'll send more ships," Day said. The red chain doesn't give up. I know, Tay replied. We need to get somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach us. There is nowhere safe, Lyra said quietly. I've been running for 12 years. There's always someone who wants to use me. Or kill me to keep others from using me. Tay thought for a moment. Then he made a decision. I have a sister on Earth, Hana. She's a lawyer who works with refugees. If anyone can help us, it's her. Earth is in the core systems. That's a month's travel from here. Then we better get started. Over the next few days, they settled into an uneasy routine. Tay sent an encrypted message to his sister, explaining the situation. Lyra slowly recovered from her injuries in the med bay. Day kept the ship running and watched for pursuers. Late one night, Tay found Lyra sitting in the observation deck, staring at the stars. He sat down next to her. Can't sleep? He asked. I keep thinking about my daughter, Nari. She was 8 when they took me. She'd be 20 now. Lyra's voice was so quiet. I don't even know if she's alive. What happened to her? I don't know. When the Krell attacked, we were separated in the chaos. I've searched every slave market, every refugee camp. Nothing. Tay didn't know what to say. What words could help someone who'd lost everything? Why did you really save me? Lyra asked. The truth this time. Tay was quiet for a long time. 5 years ago, my wife died in a colony raid. I was off-world on a cargo run. By the time I got back, it was too late. I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her. He paused. When I saw you in those chains, I had a choice. Walk away like I always do or try to help. For once in my life, I wanted to be the person who didn't walk away. Lyra reached over and took his hand. Her touch was gentle. Thank you, she said, for being that person. They sat together in the darkness, watching the stars pass by, 2 broken people trying to find their way to something better. Behind them, in the cold vastness of space, the red chain was gathering its forces. The hunt had only just begun. Hana's response came 3 days later. Her face appeared on the comm screen, and Tay felt a wave of emotion seeing his sister after so long. She looked older, more tired, but her eyes were still fierce. Tay, what have you gotten yourself into? She asked, but there was no anger in her voice, only concern. I know it sounds crazy, Tay said, but I couldn't leave her there. Hana sighed. I've been working with Velian refugees for 2 years now. I know what the red chain does to them. You did the right thing. She paused. But this is going to be complicated. The red chain has connections everywhere, even in the core systems. Can you help her get asylum? I can try, but the legal process takes time, months, maybe longer. And you said they're hunting you both? We've been attacked 3 times in the last week, Day said from off-screen. Lost 2 cargo containers and our rear shield generator. This old ship can't take much more. Hana thought for a moment. I have contacts in the outer colonies. There's a settlement called Haven's Rest, built by refugees and people who don't fit anywhere else. It's not on any official maps. You'd be safe there while I work on the legal side. Send us the coordinates, Tay said. And Hana? Thank you. His sister smiled. That's what family does. Be careful, brother. The course to Haven's Rest took them through dangerous territory. They had to avoid the main shipping lanes where Red Chain informants watched for them. Instead, they flew through empty space, weeks from any station. During the long journey, Lyra began to open up more. She told them about Velian culture, how her people valued knowledge above all else, how they shared information freely, believing that wisdom belonged to everyone. It was so different from the human way, where secrets and patents protected knowledge. On Velia Prime, our greatest scientists were honored like your world honors artists and athletes, Lyra explained one evening in the common room. We had no wars among ourselves for 3,000 years. We spent our time learning, creating, exploring. What happened? Day asked. Why did the Krell attack? Lyra's expression darkened. Because we were peaceful. Because we had no armies. No weapons. The Krell wanted our technology. When we refused to give it to them, they took it by force. Your people didn't fight back? Tay asked. We tried. But we were scientists, not soldiers. We built defense systems. But we had no experience with war. The Krell had been fighting for centuries. They knew how to destroy. We only knew how to build. She looked at her hands. I watched my world burn from orbit as they dragged me away in chains. I swore that day I would never let anyone use my knowledge to hurt others. That's why I never gave them the quantum displacement formula. I'd rather die first. You won't have to die, Tay said firmly. We're going to get you somewhere safe. But safety was harder to find than they hoped. On the 18th day of their journey, they picked up a distress signal from a small transport ship. It was under attack by pirates. We should help them, Lyra said. Day shook his head. We're barely armed ourselves. If we get involved, we risk everything. Then we risk everything, Tay said. He'd already made his choice. The wandering star dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the battle. A small family transport was surrounded by 3 pirate ships. They were demanding the cargo, threatening to kill everyone aboard. Tay opened a channel. This is the Wandering Star. Leave that ship alone. The pirates laughed. Or what, human? Your little cargo hauler is no threat to us. Maybe not, but I'm betting you don't want to fight today. You want easy prey? We're not easy. There was a pause. Then one pirate ship broke formation and headed toward them. Tay's heart pounded. This was it. Remember, Lyra said calmly from the co-pilot seat, humans are unpredictable. That's your strength. They'll expect you to follow standard combat tactics. Don't. What's standard combat tactics? Tay asked. Exactly. When the pirate ship got close, it fired. Tay did something no trained pilot would do. He flew directly toward the laser fire, angling the ship so the shots missed by inches. The pirate wasn't ready for someone to fly into an attack. Before they could react, Tay spun the ship and fired their single cargo laser meant for clearing space debris. It hit the pirate's engine at point-blank range. The ship spun out, disabled. The other 2 pirates saw this and hesitated. In that moment of confusion, the family transport jumped to faster-than-light speed and escaped. You crazy humans, one pirate said over the comm. You're all insane. Then they fled too, leaving Tay and his crew alone in space. Day was breathing hard. That was the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever seen, and it worked. Lyra was staring at Tay with something like wonder. I've studied human psychology. The academic papers say your species lacks strategic thinking, that you act on emotion rather than logic. But I understand now. You don't calculate odds. You just act, and somehow that makes you dangerous. Is that a compliment? Tay asked. It's an observation, and maybe, yes, a compliment. 3 days later, they finally reached Haven's Rest. The settlement was built into a series of connected asteroids hidden behind a small nebula. Ships of all kinds were docked there. The place hummed with activity. As they landed, Tay saw beings from dozens of species walking the corridors. Humans, Velians, Kryn, even a few Krell who'd deserted their empire. Everyone here had a story. Everyone was running from something or searching for something. A human woman met them at the dock. She was older, with gray hair and kind eyes. I'm Mira. Hana told me you were coming. Welcome to Haven's Rest. Thank you, Lyra said. It's been a long time since anyone welcomed me anywhere. Mira showed them to living quarters. Real rooms with real beds. Lyra hadn't slept in a real bed in 12 years. When she saw it, she started crying. Tay looked away, giving her privacy. That night, they gathered in the settlement's common hall. Hundreds of people ate together, talked together, laughed together. Mira explained that Haven's Rest was built by refugees who'd found each other in the darkness of space. "We have a rule here," Mira said. "No one asks about your past unless you want to share it. No one judges where you came from. What matters is who you choose to be now." Over the next week, something changed in Lyra. The constant fear in her eyes began to fade. She walked through the settlement and met other freed slaves. They shared their stories. Some cried, some laughed. All of them understood what it meant to survive. One evening, Lyra found Tay working on the ship's engine. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do humans care so much about strangers? I've studied your species. You're not the strongest or smartest in the galaxy. You don't have the best technology. But you're the only ones who risk everything to help people you don't even know. Why?" Tay put down his tools. "I don't know if all humans are like that. But I think when we see someone suffering, we see ourselves. We know what it's like to hurt, to lose things we love. And we can't stand by and do nothing. Maybe that makes us foolish, but it also makes us human." Lyra smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. "I spent 12 years believing kindness was dead in this galaxy. Thank you for proving me wrong." That night, Mira called an urgent meeting. She had news from Hana. "Your sister has been working with Velian refugee groups. There's a camp on the moon of Terrace 9 where survivors have gathered. She's been helping them search for lost family members." Lyra's hand went to her chest. "Does she have information about my daughter?" "She has a database of survivors. She's sending it now." For 3 days, Lyra searched through the names. Thousands of Velians who'd survived the war. Thousands of stories of loss and survival. But no Nari. Tai watched her hope dim with each day. He wanted to comfort her, but what could he say? Some losses couldn't be fixed. On the 4th day, Lyra was in the common hall when a young woman walked up to her. She had the same silver-blue skin, the same dark eyes. She spoke in the Velian language, her voice shaking. Lyra looked up. Their eyes met, and the whole galaxy seemed to stop. "Mother?" the young woman said. Lyra dropped the datapad. "Nari?" They fell into each other's arms, crying and holding on like they'd never let go. Everyone in the hall stopped to watch. Some cried with them, because hope, real hope, was rare in this cold universe. But even in that moment of joy, alarms started blaring. Someone ran into the hall shouting, "Ships incoming! It's the Red Chain! They found us!" The common hall erupted into chaos. People ran in all directions. Children cried. Outside, through the viewing ports, Tay could see ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Dozens of them, all bearing the Red Chain symbol of the Syndicate. Mira's voice boomed over the speaker system. "Everyone to evacuation positions! This is not a drill!" Tay grabbed Lyra's arm. "We need to go. Now!" But Lyra was holding Nari, her daughter, the child she thought she'd lost forever. Her eyes were torn between joy and terror. "I just found her. I can't lose her again." "You won't," Tay promised. "But we need to move." They ran through the corridors toward the docking bay. All around them, people were scrambling to get to ships. Haven's Rest had always known this day might come. They had evacuation plans, but plans only worked if they had time. A massive explosion rocked the settlement. The Red Chain wasn't bothering with warnings. They were attacking immediately. Day was already at the Wandering Star, firing up the engines. "Come on! We need to leave before they lock down the whole sector." But as Tay helped Lyra and Nari aboard, he saw something that made his heart sink. The docking bay was full of people, families with children, elderly refugees who moved slowly. There were too many people and not enough ships. "There's at least 3,000 people here," Mira said, running up to them. "We have ships for maybe half that number. The rest—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Lyra looked at the crowd, then at her daughter, then at Tay. In her eyes, he saw a war being fought. The mother who wanted to protect her child. The scientist who'd sworn to never let her knowledge be used for evil. The survivor who'd been running for 12 years. "How long until they breach the settlement?" Lyra asked. 24 hours. Maybe less," Mira replied. "Their ships are heavily armed. Our defense systems won't hold long." Nari grabbed her mother's hand. "We should go, while we can." But Lyra was staring at something across the docking bay. Mining equipment, stored in the corner, ship parts waiting for repairs, scattered pieces of technology from a dozen different species. "Unless," she whispered. "Unless what?" Tay asked. Lyra turned to him. "I told you about quantum displacement technology. I said it could change space travel forever. I also said it was dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could destroy worlds." "I remember. But in the right hands, it could save thousands of lives." She looked at the mining equipment again. "We could build a prototype. It wouldn't be elegant, it would barely work. But it could create a temporary wormhole large enough to evacuate everyone to human-protected space." Day stepped forward. "You're talking about technology that's never been successfully tested. Theory only." "Theory is all I have," Lyra said. "But theory built on 30 years of research. I know it can work." "How long would it take to build?" Mira asked. Lyra did calculations in her head, her eyes moving rapidly. "Months, normally. We'd need precise equipment, controlled conditions, teams of scientists." "We have 18 hours, Tay said, "and none of those things." Another explosion shook the settlement, closer this time. People screamed. A section of the outer hull breached, and emergency doors slammed shut. Lyra made her decision. "Then we work with what we have. Nari is an engineer. I taught her everything I know before we were separated. Together we can figure this out." "Mother, this is insane," Nari said. "The calculations alone would take weeks." "Then we work faster." Lyra's voice was steel. "I've spent 12 years protecting this knowledge because I was afraid of what would happen if the wrong people had it. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the right choice isn't to hide it. Maybe it's to use it to save people." Tay looked at her. "If we do this, the Red Chain will know you're here. They'll focus all their firepower on this location. We won't be able to run." "I know. And if it doesn't work, we all die here." "I know that too." Tay smiled. "Then let's get to work." Mira spread the word. Within minutes, every engineer, mechanic, and scientist in Haven's Rest gathered in the main hangar. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages. But they all understood the stakes. Lyra stood on a platform and explained her plan. She used diagrams drawn on data pads, equations written in the air with light projectors. Most people didn't understand the advanced physics, but they understood the core idea. Bend space, create a door, walk through it to safety. "This is what we need," Lyra said. "Power generators from the mining rigs, shield emitters from the ships, quantum computer cores from anywhere we can get them, and time. Time to assemble it all." Nari stepped up beside her mother. "I'll handle the structural framework. We can use the station's support beams." A Kryn engineer raised his hand. "I can modify the power systems, but we'll need to disable half the settlement systems to generate enough energy." "Do it," Mira said. A human scientist spoke up. "The quantum calculations need to be perfect. One mistake, and we could create a black hole instead of a wormhole." "That's why my mother and I will handle that part," Nari said. "Together." For the next 12 hours, Haven's Rest became a place of focused chaos. People worked without stopping. Humans brought their talent for improvisation, building things that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Velians provided mathematical precision. Other species contributed their unique skills. Tay and Day coordinated the defense. They organized the few weapons the settlement had. They set up shields and barriers. When Red Chain ships tried to land boarding parties, human defenders fought with tactics that made no logical sense but worked anyway. "They're trying to flank us from Section 7, a defender called. "Then we collapse Section 7, Tay replied. "Seal it off and vent it to space." "That's against every safety protocol." "Good thing I don't follow protocols." The Red Chain commanders were frustrated. They'd expected an easy raid. Instead, they faced organized resistance from species they considered weak. Every time they thought they had a pattern figured out, the defenders changed tactics. But slowly, inevitably, the Red Chain pushed forward. They had more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. Haven's Rest couldn't hold forever. In the hangar, Lyra and Nari worked side by side, mother and daughter reunited in the most desperate circumstances. They spoke in their native language, finishing each other's sentences, moving in perfect sync. Years apart couldn't break the bond they shared. "The quantum field isn't stable," Nari said, checking readings. "It keeps fluctuating." "Because we're using mining equipment instead of precision instruments," Lyra replied. "We need to compensate, add a secondary stabilizer." "There isn't time to build one." "Then we improvise." They worked through problems that should have been impossible. When standard solutions didn't work, they invented new ones. Other scientists watched in awe as they turned theory into reality before their eyes. With 6 hours left, the device was nearly complete. It looked like a mad artist's sculpture. Pieces from 100 different machines, held together with welds and hope. But when they powered it up, the readings were promising. "It might actually work," a human engineer said, disbelief in his voice. "It will work," Lyra said firmly. "It has to." Tay found her during a brief break. She was sitting alone, hands shaking from exhaustion and fear. He sat beside her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing I could do this." "You saved yourself," Tay replied. "I just gave you a chance." "No, you gave me more than that. You reminded me that knowledge isn't dangerous. People are. And the right people using knowledge can save worlds instead of destroying them." Outside, another explosion rocked the settlement. The Red Chain was breaching the inner defenses. They had maybe 4 hours left. Lyra stood up. "Let's finish this." The final assembly took 3 hours. Every connection had to be perfect. Every calculation triple-checked. While they worked, defenders fell back, section by section. The Red Chain was at their doorstep. Finally, with minutes to spare, Lyra activated the device. Energy surged through the cobbled-together machine. The air in the hangar began to shimmer and twist. Reality itself bent, and in the center of the hangar, a doorway opened. Not to another place in this space, but to another space entirely. Through it, they could see stars they'd never seen before. A safe sector, far from Red Chain control. "It's working!" someone shouted. But Lyra was staring at the control panel, her face pale. "Someone needs to stay here. To stabilize the field and keep the wormhole open until everyone gets through. If it collapses too early, people will be trapped in folded space forever." "How long?" Mira asked. 20 minutes minimum. The Red Chain will be here in 10. Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then whoever stays will have to hold them off." Nari grabbed her mother's arm. "No, I just got you back. And I just got you back too, which is why you're going through that door, staying safe." Tay stepped forward. "I'll stay." Everyone turned to look at him. Day started to protest, but Tay shook his head. "Someone has to. Might as well be me." Lyra met his eyes. "I won't leave you here alone. You have to. Your daughter needs you. And you're the reason I have my daughter. I'm not leaving." They stood facing each other, both stubborn, both ready to sacrifice everything. Around them, people were already evacuating through the wormhole, ships flying through to safety, families holding hands as they stepped into the unknown. Day put his hand on Tay's shoulder. "Guess we're staying then. Someone has to keep you two from doing something stupid." Nari looked at her mother, tears streaming down her face. "I can't lose you again." Lyra hugged her daughter tight. "You won't, I promise. Now go, be safe. Live the life I always wanted for you." With the red chain at the gates, the last refugees fled through the wormhole. Nari went last, looking back at her mother one final time before stepping through. Then it was just Tay, Lyra, and Day, standing before a doorway to safety they couldn't use, ready to face an army to save people they barely knew. "No going back now," Day said. "Nope," Tay replied. The red chain breached the hangar door, and the final battle began. Red chain soldiers poured through the breached hangar door. 50 of them, maybe more, all heavily armed. They spread out in practiced formation, expecting easy targets. They found something else entirely. Tay opened fire with a plasma rifle he'd grabbed from the weapons locker. He didn't aim carefully. He didn't need to. At this range, spray and pray worked fine. 3 soldiers went down before the others found cover. Beside him, Day worked the defense turrets they'd hastily set up. "We can't hold them long. We don't need long," Lyra shouted over the noise. She was at the control panel, her fingers flying over the controls. 17 minutes until everyone is through and I can safely collapse the wormhole." 17 minutes. It might as well have been 17 hours. The Red Chain commander's voice boomed across the hangar. "Surrender the Velian woman and we'll let the rest of you live." "How about you leave and we let you live?" Tay shouted back. Laser fire was the response. It tore through the air where Tay had been standing a second before. He rolled behind a cargo container, breathing hard. This wasn't going to work. They were 3 people against an army. Basic math said they'd lose, but Tay had learned something important from Lyra. Sometimes you had to throw out the math. "Day! Remember that crazy stunt we pulled in the drift?" "Which crazy stunt? We've done like 100. The one with the debris." Understanding dawned on Day's face. He grinned. "You're insane." "Probably." Tay grabbed a detonator from his belt. When they'd built the wormhole device, they'd pulled support beams from half the hangar. The structure was barely stable. One good explosion in the right place would bring half the ceiling down. He threw the detonator toward the Red Chain soldiers. It skittered across the floor. They saw it and dove for cover. The explosion rocked the entire hangar. Chunks of ceiling crashed down, crushing soldiers and blocking their advance. Dust and debris filled the air. Through the chaos, Tay heard screaming and the sound of crumbling metal. "That bought us maybe 5 minutes," Day said. "Then we use every second." But the Red Chain wasn't done. More soldiers came through the breach. These ones had heavy armor and shield generators. They advanced slowly, protected from gunfire. Lyra looked up from the controls, her face grim. 12 minutes left, but the wormhole is destabilizing. The explosion damaged the power flow. If I can't fix it, it will collapse and trap everyone inside. "Can you fix it from there?" Tay asked. "No. I need to access the primary power junction. It's on the other side of the hangar." She pointed across the open space where Red Chain soldiers were taking positions. "That's suicide," Day said. "It's the only way." Tay reloaded his rifle. "Then I'll cover you. Day, keep them busy from here." "This is a terrible plan," Day muttered, but he was already moving to a better position. Tay and Lyra ran across the hangar. Laser fire erupted around them. Tay fired back without aiming, just trying to keep heads down. Something burned across his shoulder and he stumbled. Lyra caught him. "I'm fine," he gasped. "Keep moving." They made it to the power junction. Lyra tore open the access panel and started rewiring connections. Her hands moved with impossible speed, connecting circuits that should have taken hours to reconfigure. A Red Chain soldier appeared around the corner. Tay shot him, then another. and another. His rifle was running low on charge. "How much longer?" he asked. "2 minutes." The Red Chain commander appeared, protected by a personal shield. He raised his weapon toward Lyra's back. Tay threw himself forward, tackling her aside. The laser blast missed them by inches. "You humans really are insane," the commander said. He was a Krell, tall and covered in gray scales. "That woman is worth millions, yet you die for her." "Why?" "Because that's what we do," Tay replied, getting to his feet. His rifle was empty. He drew a small pistol. "We see someone who needs help, and we help. Even if it's stupid. Even if it's impossible. That's what makes us human." The Krell laughed. "Sentiment. It will get you killed." "Maybe, but I've had a good run." Tay fired. The shots bounced off the personal shield. The Krell advanced, raising his weapon. This was it. Tay had always known he'd die in space. At least it was for something that mattered. Then Lyra's hand touched his shoulder. "Done. The power flow is stable." The wormhole behind them flared brighter. Through it, Tay could see the last refugees fleeing to safety. Children holding their parents' hands, families staying together, 3,000 souls who would live because of what they'd done here. "10 minutes until I can safely collapse it," Lyra said. But the Krell commander was still advancing. Behind him, more soldiers were climbing over the debris. They were out of time and out of options. Then, something unexpected happened. The hangar door on the opposite side exploded inward. Ships poured through, human military vessels, and leading them was a sleek diplomatic craft bearing Earth's symbol. Hana's voice came over every speaker in the hangar. "This is Hana Lee, representing the Earth Alliance. We have received reports of illegal imprisonment and human rights violations in this sector. All Red Chain personnel, stand down immediately or face military intervention." The Red Chain soldiers hesitated. Earth was a core system power. Fighting them meant war with one of the galaxy's major factions. "We have right of salvage," the Krell commander argued. "That Velian is stolen property." "That Velian is a person, not property." Hana's voice was cold steel. "And my brother and his friends are Earth citizens. You've just committed an act of war." Earth military ships took position around the hangar. The Red Chain vessels outside began to retreat. Without backup, the soldiers in the hangar were outnumbered. The Krell commander looked at Tay with hatred. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is," Tay replied. The Red Chain forces withdrew. Slowly, the hangar fell silent except for the hum of the wormhole device. Hana's diplomatic ship landed and she ran out, throwing her arms around Tay. "You idiot," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful idiot." "How did you know to come?" Tay asked. "Nari came through the wormhole and immediately contacted me. She told me everything. I gathered every favor I had, called in every debt. The Earth Alliance agreed to send military support." Hana looked at Lyra. "And after this, there's no way they can refuse your asylum request." 5 minutes later, the last person came through the wormhole. A small child, scared and alone, running through the shimmering doorway. Lyra caught her and passed her to waiting hands. "Everyone's through," Lyra said. "We can close it now." She and Tay worked the controls together. The wormhole began to shrink. As it collapsed, it released a massive pulse of energy that swept across the sector. Red Chain ships trying to return were caught in the wave. Their systems failed. They drifted helpless in space. When the dust settled, Lyra collapsed. Tay caught her. She was exhausted beyond measure, but she was smiling. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Tay corrected. "We just helped." The next 6 months were a blur. There were trials and hearings. The Red Chain Syndicate was exposed. Evidence of their crimes spread across the galaxy. Public opinion turned against slavery. Systems that had looked the other way could no longer ignore what was happening. Lyra testified before the Galactic Council. She spoke about 12 years of slavery, about being treated as property instead of a person, about the thousands like her who suffered in silence. Her testimony was broadcast across every world. The council passed new laws. Slavery was officially banned in all core systems. Military forces were authorized to free enslaved beings wherever they found them. It wasn't perfect. Laws didn't change hearts overnight, but it was a start. Lyra and Nari were granted citizenship on Earth. They settled in a quiet city where Lyra could teach at a university again. She published her quantum displacement research, sharing it freely with all species. Within a year, the technology was revolutionizing space travel. Ty didn't go back to hauling freight. He and Day started something new, a rescue operation called the Freedom Chain. They traveled the galaxy finding enslaved beings and setting them free. Other humans joined them, then other species. Soon they had a fleet of ships, all dedicated to ending slavery wherever they found it. Lyra helped design their ships. She created technology that made rescues possible. Stealth systems that could slip past any defense. Weapons that disabled without killing. Every innovation shared freely because knowledge belonged to everyone. On a warm spring day on Earth, in a small garden overlooking the ocean, Ty and Lyra stood together. Around them were people they loved. Hana stood as witness. Nari smiled with tears in her eyes. Day made jokes about how his life had gotten way more complicated since that day on Helix 7. The ceremony was simple. Vows spoken in 2 languages. Promises to stand together, to fight together, to build something beautiful in a cold universe. When it was done, Nari hugged them both. "My father would have liked you," she told Ty. "He always said the universe needed more people who acted on kindness instead of logic." "I'm not sure rescuing your mother was kind," Tay replied. "Might have been the stupidest thing I've ever done." Lyra laughed. "It was both. That's what makes it human." That night, they stood on a balcony looking up at the stars. So many worlds out there, so many people still in chains, but also hope. Real hope that things could change. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked. "Giving up your old life?" Tay thought about the 5 years he'd spent running from his pain, hauling cargo and asking no questions. Then he thought about the last 6 months, the people they'd saved, the lives they'd changed, the difference they'd made. "Not even a little bit," he said. Somewhere in the galaxy, in a dark station where law meant nothing, another person in chains waited for rescue. Another merchant looked the other way. Another crime went unpunished. But somewhere else, a ship called Freedom's Hope was preparing to launch. Its crew was made up of humans and Velians and a dozen other species. They'd heard about someone who needed help, and they were going to provide it. Because that's what they did now. They saw someone in chains and they broke them. The Red Chain learned to fear that ship, other slavers too. Because once humans decided something was wrong, they didn't give up. They didn't calculate the odds. They just kept fighting until things changed. Word spread across the galaxy. If you needed help, if you were trapped, if you'd given up hope, wait for the humans. They'd come. They always came. Lyra published a paper about her experience. It was titled, "The Illogical Kindness of Humanity." In it, she argued that humans' greatest strength wasn't their technology or military power. It was their stubborn refusal to accept that some people didn't matter. Other species read it and didn't understand. How could a species survive by caring so much about strangers? How could they risk everything for people they'd never met? But enslaved beings understood. They told stories about the human who saved them, about the ones who risked their lives for no reward except knowing they'd helped. Those stories gave hope to people who had none. And hope, as it turned out, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Years later, when Ty was old and gray, he sat with his grandchildren and told them about the day he met their grandmother. about the choice he made on a station where nobody cared about one enslaved woman. "Why did you help her, Grandpa?" his youngest granddaughter asked. Tay smiled. "Because she asked. And because I could. That's all the reason anyone needs." The galaxy was still a dangerous place, still had its shadows and cruelties, but it also had light. It had people who fought for each other. It had hope. And it all started because one human saw someone in chains and couldn't walk away. That's what it meant to be human, to see suffering and choose to act, to face impossible odds and try anyway, to believe that one person could make a difference. Tay had proved it, and thousands followed his example. The revolution started with one choice, but it echoed forever.